Hi there everyone and welcome to the Stamping with Sara webisode. Today I'm excited to show you this beautiful stamp set from our friends at Studio Light called Floral Wreath. So those of you with a membership to our Stamping with Sara webisodes have already seen this month's stamp, and you already know about the paper pack that I'm using today, which is the 6x6 inch Whispering Florals collection. And this pack has 24 gorgeous coordinating sheets that you can see here with 112 cutout elements. They are a perfect combination with our stamp set for today. So if you're not already a member, do stay tuned to the end of this webisode for more information on how you can get each month's stamp set early and at a discount. So our stamp set today has two silhouette style designs. Now these are clear stamps. Each of these designs measures 3 inches long, and they can be used together to form a wreath shape. You can also, of course, use them individually. You can have them going opposite directions. You can use them to create a background. There are a lot of possibilities with this set. And I've actually found that this is one of those kinds of designs that I tend to reach for over and over again just to add an extra little touch to cards and other paper crafts. Especially good if you like working with floral elements. Now today I'm going to combine them with white embossing powder to create a resist for ink blending with our Hunky Dory dye-based inks. So as you can see, we have a lot of creative possibilities to explore today, and I am so glad you're here. So won't you please come stamp with us? Let's talk a little bit about resist inking. Well, you can see here my white floral silhouette. This is the design, or one of the two stamps in today's stamp set, embossed with white embossing powder and then inked with a blending brush and dye-based ink pads. Now you can do this technique onto white cardstock, and we'll have a look at that on another project today. You can also do this on pattern paper and add ink, and that's what I've done here. So on one of those beautiful background papers from our pattern paper collection, I've simply stamped and added some tone-on-tone ink so that I'm able to take advantage of the shades of green in the background paper, but then also add some more emphasis around my stamped element. So let's have a look at the process, and we can start with the tools that you'll need. First of all, I'm working onto my craft mat. This will protect my work surface, especially as we're working with a heat tool. I also need to have on hand, of course, my stamp positioner. I'm using the Misty today. You can also use a clear acrylic stamping block. I do need to have my embossing ink pad, and this is the one that I'm using today. I also need to have my embossing powder, and I'm using an opaque white embossing powder for this technique today. All right, so later on we'll need to have our dye-based ink pad and also our blending brush, so I've got those off to the side. Now when I'm doing my heat embossing, I also like to have a folded sheet of scrap paper on hand to catch the excess embossing powder and return it to the jar, because you don't need very much embossing powder. A little bit will go a long way, which is wonderful. Alrighty, so I've got my stamp over here on one side of my stamp positioner, and I've got my pattern paper secured down over on the other side. So what I need to do now is simply ink up my stamp with my embossing ink pad. The only tricky part of this is that because the ink is clear, it's a little tricky to see, so I always like to tap on my stamp a couple of times to make sure that I've gotten coverage on this, and then I'll simply close this up and press gently but firmly, making sure that all of those areas connect. And again, tricky to see because you can't really see it on the pattern paper here. But when I add my embossing powder, you will be able to see this. So I'm going to be working pretty quickly here. Open up my scrap paper, and then I'm going to just dump my embossing powder right on here. Now I can be really generous with this because everything excess is just going to go back into my folded piece of paper, and then we'll go back into my jar. I think you can see a little bit of that design on there so far. Okay, I'm going to tap off any excess, and then use my paper to funnel this back into my jar. Hopefully I won't spill anything. And then I can do my heat setting. So I have my heat tool off to the side, and again working onto my craft mat, which is heat resistant. I'm simply going to hold this in place. I'm going to bring in my heat tool and then heat set my embossed design. So this will take a second, but you'll see that beautiful design pop off. All right, so I think my design has all been heat set. It looks just beautiful. And I really love how the delicate design of the stamp works so nicely with the delicate pattern of my pattern paper. So I could leave this as is. This looks really nice, but I do want to add in some ink. So I'm working with the khaki ink pad. Now this is a dye-based ink pad from Hunky Dory, and dye-based ink pads just work really nicely for this. It's ideal. You can blend it easily, and you can even combine and layer colors. So what I'll do is just grab my blending brush. I'm going to pick up some color from the ink pad, and then I'm starting with a light touch, and I'm just gently swirling on some of this color here. And you can see again how this is going to make that white embossing really pop so that you can have even more of a contrast effect. So the darker color ink you use, of course, the more contrast you'll have. So this is where those really dark and vivid colors of your ink pads, this is where they really come in handy. And then I can add as much or as little ink as I want. The reason that I'm using a blending brush rather than simply pressing my ink pad onto the design is so that I'm able to have a bit more control over where that ink is going, and to make sure that the outer edges here are soft and blended rather than being rectangular or square shaped depending on your ink pad. So this will give me a softer and a bit more natural effect. So there we go. We've got a beautiful design. And again, I can keep adding on as much color as I like, or if I wanted to incorporate other colors, this would also be a really perfect opportunity for that. And then I've got my design ready to go. So let's come back to the card. Now the card is a 5 by 5 inch square card blank from Hunky Dory. I really like these, especially with our 6 by 6 pattern papers. And these are pre-scored card blanks measuring 5 by 5. These are an Ink Me range, so you can also do some really fun inking techniques directly onto those card blanks as well. Then I've die cut the inked and embossed image into a circle, and for that I'm using the 12 circle and scallop dies. This is one of my well-loved stamp die sets here. This is one that I use an awful lot. And I've created this layered effect here with the smooth circle nested onto a white scalloped circle. The front of my card has this beautiful pattern paper, and then I've added one of the little cutouts. This is the hello cutouts down at the bottom, accented with some jute twine. This butterfly that I have up here is from the stained glass die collection, which has a beautiful combination of butterflies, dragonflies, and hummingbirds. And I've popped this one up here at the top corner with some foam tape. And I'm also using the lilac cardstock to create one layer of my butterfly. And this comes from the Whispering Florals cardstock pack. And I can show this to you. These are the cardstock colors that I'm using for today's webisode because of course they go perfectly with the Whispering Florals paper pack. Then for my card inside, I have a really simple piece of the pattern paper with the floral stamps pointing away from one another. And this has also been heat embossed with the white embossing powder. There is no additional inking here. So again, you can mix and match this technique depending on the look that you're going for. But I absolutely love this onto that dark pattern paper. I think that's really pretty. And finally, I've got another cutout sentiment from the paper pack to finish it off. For this 5 by 6.5 inch card, I also incorporated the nested arches dies to create a layered focal. Now, my silhouette images are stamped and white embossed facing toward each other, and I wanted to incorporate some of the patterned paper florals that are printed onto this background design, and then also create a layered kind of collage here with our cutout and then also a bow tied in some jute twine. So let me show you the dies that I'm working with. These are really nice because they give you lots of different options for creating a matted nested focal. So with 6 different sizes of arch, of course you can use them individually, but they work beautifully when they're used together. So I've got 3 on here all told. So I've die cut my first layer here from this pattern paper, and I want to show this to you because I think it's really striking, the before inking and after inking. And the ink pad that I worked with here is the Vintage Rose, and doing my blending technique that we saw earlier. Now with this, I think it really darkens and changes the center area here, the lighter area of my pattern paper, but I love what it does to the printed corner accents on here. You can still see them and they're still part of the overall design, but they aren't in competition with my stamped element. So they're definitely more muted, but still very beautiful. So I really like how this combination has turned out. Now, after I've die cut this into an arch, I've inked around the outside using the mustard ink pad. And I've die cut and inked this and then layered this again onto a white arch, which has also been inked with the mustard, and then again onto another arch cut from patterned paper. This green pattern paper here is the background. Top and bottom have also been inked with our mustard. And then I've got my card covered with green cardstock from the Whispering Florals cardstock pack. And again, I've got my cutout here. This is popped up with some foam tape and my bow tied from jute twine. This is again one of my all-time favorites. I really do like to add just a little touch of softness, and the jute twine works perfectly for this. So this is just tied and glued down at the bottom. Then for my card inside, I have another layered arch with a strip of green pattern paper going across here. Now the thank you sentiment is from the More Greetings Dazzle set, and I want to show you these. I'm using the white set on this card and throughout today's webisode because I like how it gives the look of white embossing, but these come in other colors as well. So you can see here with the silver set, which I haven't quite gotten into as much as I have with the other colors, but you have a variety of different font sizes and styles and sentiments that just work beautifully for any kind of card giving occasion. So for this card, I'm using the stamps perhaps more as they were designed to be used to create a wreath. And this creates a really fun focal area and a nice place for me to put my dazzle message right in the center. Again, one of the greetings dazzles. Now I'm working in this case with a series of nested circle dies. And when I'm positioning my stamps in order to create the wreath effect, what I really recommend is that you first die cut your circle shape, figure out how big of a space you have, and then you will need to play with the positioning here. So this is the wreath as it goes end to end. And in this case, what I've done is I ended up with the 2 very tips overlapping a little bit so that they were able to fit into my circle. So here's the process I used. First, die cutting my circle from white cardstock, stamping and embossing one half of my wreath, and then coming back and doing the other half of my wreath to make sure that that will fit in there perfectly. And again, those little ends overlapped, but that's not a problem because I've got one of my jute twine bows overlapping that, and it turns out just fine. So I'm stamping onto white cardstock here, and the cardstock that I'm working with is the lightweight essential card block from Hunky Dory. This stamps beautifully, it inks beautifully, and it die cuts beautifully too. So that worked really well. And the ink that I'm using is the violet, and I was pretty light-handed with this. I wanted to have some darker color around the outside, but then keep this area a little bit lighter. And that's all done with the violet. And then of course I've got my nested, layered, scalloped and smooth circles. I'm popping up this layer and this layer with foam tape, so I've got some more dimension on there. My card blank is a 5-inch square, and I've inked the edges with our mustard ink pad before placing this right in the middle. And then for the inside of my card, I have some more pattern paper, plus another greeting dazzle. Our final card uses the stamps to create a background. So I've stamped and embossed the two designs onto a white Hunky Dory cardstock. Now, as with our wreath design, I worked in sections, so stamping and embossing two of the images at a time and working around the paper. And after that, I've inked with the Stormy Night ink pad. And I think this just coordinates beautifully with our background paper and provides a nice contrast to the pops of white cardstock I've used here for my butterfly die cuts as well as my lace border. So let's take a look at each of those dies that I'm using. We can start with this gorgeous border here, which is made with the On the Edge card cutting dies. As you can see, you've got 4 designs in here. This is the one that I've used. You can use these in a couple of different ways, and of course, hot off the press always gives you lots of options here. In this case, I just used a portion of that, kind of trimmed it down a little bit too, and then simply glued it onto the front of my card, right on top of that pattern paper I've used here. And then I've got my stamped and embossed piece, and then of course I've got my butterflies. These again are from the stained glass set, and I wanted to give you a closer look at this too with the butterflies. So you've got a couple of different components that you can put together. So 1, 2, 3 makes a layered butterfly like this. Of course, you can use these individually as well. One trick I would suggest when you are gluing any kind of intricate image like the butterfly or like that lace border is to work with your sticky specks. These are micro dots of adhesive, and they just make it a whole lot easier and less messy to adhere these intricate detail elements together. So then I've also wrapped the front of my card with this jute twine, and then for the inside I have a leftover strip of embossed cardstock plus pattern paper and the Just Because dazzle. And this is our final project of the day today. So these stamps and the paper pack are available as a money saver, as I mentioned earlier. And you can see that special offer on the right-hand side of your screen. And as I also mentioned at the beginning of this webisode, you can get the latest stamps and papers with our monthly Stamping with Sara subscription. So let's have a look here. I've got more information here for you too. You will be the first to receive the stamp of the month. You get that before the webisode airs. And you'll save 10% off the retail price. Now you'll also get a free goodie each month, plus a free gift with your membership. And the free gift is the wood grain stamp, which makes a gorgeous background design. And this is also shown on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, if you happen to be watching us on YouTube, we'd love for you to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And please do join us on paperwishes.com. This is the only place you'll find this fabulous membership subscription. You'll also see that we create 6 webisodes each week to inspire your creative spirit. So there's always something fun for you online. Thank you again for joining me today. We're really glad that you're here, and we're so happy you are a part of our Paper Wishes family. Do feel free to leave a comment. We love to hear what you think. I'll see you next month for another episode of Stamping with Sara.